My name is Maya. I'm 12 years old, and last autumn, my mother flew to South America for 5 weeks and left me holding a wrinkled $50 bill and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're capable now, she said, tugging her roller bag toward the porch. You're not a child anymore. Just figure it out if you need anything, all right? Capable. That was her word for it, not mine. I stood there watching that bill fold between my fingers. $50. No plan. No babysitter. Not even a real hug goodbye. Just a quick kiss on my forehead that felt more like checking a box, the scrape of wheels on pavement, and the click of the door shutting behind her. I'll manage, I said aloud to the empty hallway, as if saying it would make the knot in my chest disappear, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. There was no one else here. No one who knew how to cook. No one who even realized I'd been left behind like forgotten luggage. I told myself this was some kind of test. A challenge I could win if I just stayed strong enough. Day one, I thought. I'll prove I can do this. I lined up the few cans in the cupboard, checked the fridge that was already half empty, and swallowed my fear like bitter medicine. If my mother thought I was capable, maybe she was about to find out what that word really meant. Because as those weeks crawled forward, that $50 would vanish, the food would run out, and the silence in our house would grow teeth. And when they finally came back, what my mother saw inside our home made her whisper through tears, "Oh God, this can't be real." Do you want to know how being left with $50 at 12 became the one decision that made my mother regret everything she'd ever done to me? Stay until the end, and you'll see exactly how I made sure she could never forget it. The first problem hit me about 20 minutes after the taxi pulled away. My mother had tossed what she called an emergency debit card onto the counter like that solved everything. There was just one small issue. It wasn't activated, and I didn't know the password. I found that out the hard way standing in our kitchen with my phone in my hand, trying to order food online and watching every app reject the card one by one. So it was just me. A useless piece of plastic and $50. Day one. I turned it into a game in my head. I sliced bread as thin as I could, spread butter so carefully it barely covered the surface, and told myself real survivors made things last. I even joked to myself that this would make a good story someday. By day 4, it stopped being funny. The pantry looked like the before picture in a charity commercial. A couple of cans I didn't know how to open without cutting myself. A box of crackers with more air than food. A jar of olives I hated. My stomach growled loud enough to embarrass me, even though no one else was there. I tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV and let random shows play, noise filling the room so I didn't have to hear the house creak. I opened my mother's laptop and stared at her work emails stacked up like they mattered more than anything. At one point, I grabbed my journal and wrote in big letters at the top of a blank page, "Evidence." Under it, I scribbled, "Left alone at 12, $50, no food plan, no check-ins." I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it, but writing it down made something inside me shift. If they thought I was old enough to be left alone, then I was old enough to remember everything, to record everything, to show someone someday how they chose a vacation over me. I picked up my phone and opened the camera app. Day 4, I said quietly to the lens. My face looked smaller than I expected. I'm still alone. The card doesn't work. I finished the last real food yesterday. I paused, swallowing hard. If you're seeing this, it means someone finally asked what happened to me. I saved the video and locked my phone, my heart hammering. Part of me hoped no one would ever see it. Another part of me wanted that video to explode in my mother's face when she came home. I thought about my best friend, Lily, and hovered over her name in my contacts. If I texted her, I'd have to admit that my mother had left me, that I was hungry, that I wasn't okay. Instead, I sent a message that sounded normal. "Hope you're having fun on your trip." No reply. Maybe she was somewhere by a lake, eating burgers with her family, not even thinking to check her phone. My stomach twisted. By day 6, the hunger felt like fog wrapped around my brain. I started getting dizzy when I stood up to fast. I found a half-empty box of granola bars in the back of the cupboard and ate them slowly, trying to make every bite last. I opened my journal again and added another line. Day 6. Still no call from mom, not even a text. Then another line. If I disappear, this will prove it wasn't my fault. That was the moment my thinking changed. This wasn't just about surviving until she came back. This was about what would happen to her when people finally realized what she'd done. On day 8, my body felt weak, but my anger felt sharper. I shuffled to the front window and peered out at the street. Kids were riding bikes. A man walked his dog. A couple strolled by holding iced coffees. Normal lives. Normal parents. I looked at our empty driveway and whispered, "You chose South America over me. Do you know what that's going to cost you when someone finds out?" As if the universe was listening. The doorbell rang. I froze. Granola crumbs still on my fingers. And no one ever rang our doorbell. Not really. Neighbor kids just knocked. Packages got dropped at the side. The bell rang again, followed by 3 sharp knocks. My heart pounded as I moved toward the door. For a second, I thought about pretending I wasn't home. If it was someone selling something, they'd go away. But another thought cut through my fear. What if this is it? What if this is the moment someone finally sees me? Hand shaking, I reached for the handle. If you were 12, starving, and completely alone, would you open that door or would you keep pretending everything was fine? I cracked the door open just enough to see who was there. Standing on the porch was a woman in a gray cardigan with my school's logo embroidered on the pocket. It took me a second to place her without the classroom behind her. "Hi, Maya," she said gently. "It was Miss Porter, the counselor from school. I've been trying to reach your parents. They haven't answered. Can I come in for a moment?" My first instinct was to lie, to say everything was fine, that my parents were just out, that I didn't need anything. But my hand loosened on the door, and I stepped back. "Sure," I murmured. "I guess." She stepped inside and looked around. The silence in the house suddenly felt heavier. The dishes in the sink, the empty counter, the nearly bare fruit bowl, all of it became evidence I hadn't meant to stage, but had accidentally left out. "Are your parents at work?" she asked, scanning the room, clearly expecting someone to appear. "They're in Chile," I said, surprising myself with how flat my voice sounded. "For 5 weeks." Her eyebrows shot up. 5 weeks? "And who's staying with you?" I swallowed. This was the line, the moment I could choose to protect them or tell the truth. My fingers curled tighter around the edge of my shirt. "Just me," I admitted. "They said I was old enough." Something in her face changed, like a switch flipping. The polite concern turned into something sharper, more serious. She pulled out a chair and sat down at the table, motioning for me to sit across from her. "Maya, how long have you been alone?" 8 days, I whispered. "Almost. Do you have enough food? Money?" I let out a small, bitter laugh I didn't recognize. "They left me a debit card that doesn't work and $50. She stared at me for a long moment. It wasn't the way teachers stare when you forget your homework. It was something heavier, like she was trying to count all the ways this was wrong. "This is not okay," she said finally, her voice low. "You know that, right?" I shrugged, even though my chest ached. "They said they needed a break, that I'm mature, that I should be able to handle it." "And how have you been handling it?" I wanted to say fine. I wanted to keep pretending, but the journal on the table caught my eye. The word evidence stared back at me in my own handwriting. "I've been hungry," I said instead, "and scared. And I've been writing things down. Just in case." "Just in case what?" she asked. "Just in case something happens to me," I replied quietly, "so nobody can say they didn't know." Silence filled the space between us. For a moment, I hated the silence. But then I realized she wasn't ignoring it. She was feeling it, really feeling it. She leaned forward. "Maya, leaving a 12-year-old alone for over a week, for 5 weeks with almost no food and no supervision, isn't just irresponsible. It's dangerous. It's neglect. There are laws about this." My heart thudded in my ears. Neglect. Laws. Words that sounded like they belonged in TV dramas, not in my kitchen. "What happens if someone finds out?" I asked, my voice suddenly small. "Agencies get involved," she said carefully. Child Protective Services. There could be an investigation. Your parents could face serious consequences. There it was. The thing I hadn't dared to say out loud. The thing that made my anger twist into something sharper. Consequences. Consequences. I repeated slowly. For what they did to me. She didn't rush to comfort me or tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she nodded. For what they did to you. My mind raced. I imagined my mother's face when she came home to find strangers in our living room. People asking questions she couldn't dodge with a fake smile and a joke about independence. I pictured her seeing my journal, my video clips, my empty pantry. Do you want help, Maya? Miss Porter asked quietly. Real help. Not just groceries. The kind of help that makes sure this never happens again. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no. To slam the door on all of this and just wait for my parents to come back and pretend this month never happened. Another part of me, the part that had been writing the word evidence, was tired of pretending. Yes, I said finally. But if I say yes, what does that mean for them? It means they'll have to answer for their choices, she said. It means adults will finally see what you've been going through. I looked down at my hands, then back at her. Then help me, I said. I want them to see exactly what they did. I want them to feel what it's like to lose control. She nodded once firmly. First, we make sure you're safe. Then we make sure the right people hear your story. As she reached for her phone, a strange calm settled over me. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something new. A quiet, steady determination. I wasn't just a kid waiting to be rescued anymore. I was the witness. If you were in my place, would you keep protecting your parents, or would you finally let the truth become the weapon they never saw coming? Miss Porter stepped into the hallway to make a call, leaving me at the table with my journal open. I could hear fragments of her voice, low and controlled, but the words that floated back to me were enough to make my pulse race. Alone. 12. No guardian. No food in the house. I traced the ink on the page with my fingertip. Suddenly, it didn't feel like a secret diary anymore. It felt like a case file. A few minutes later, she came back. I called your neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, she said. And I also spoke with someone from the Child Protection Hotline. They're going to send someone to check on you. But first, we need to get you something to eat. My cheeks burned at the idea of people checking on me like I was some broken machine, but I also felt something else. A small flare of satisfaction. If they were checking on me, that meant they were also checking on my parents. Is this Mrs. Ramirez mad? I asked. She shook her head. No, she's worried. That's what good neighbors do. A knock sounded at the door, softer than Miss Porter's earlier one. Mrs. Ramirez stepped inside, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, landing on the journal, the empty cracker box on the counter, the pale look on my face. Oh, Maya. She breathed. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because I didn't want to look weak, I blurted out. They always tell me I'm mature, that I can handle things. I thought asking for help meant I was proving them wrong. Her expression softened. Asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. And sometimes it's the only way to make adults face what they've done. That last sentence hit me like a bell. Make adults face what they've done. We all sat down together. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a kid being talked over. They asked me to tell them everything. And I did. I told them about the suitcase rolling out the front door, the $50, the card that didn't work, the way my mother laughed when I asked who would be staying with me. You'll be fine. You're my little adult, she'd said like it was a compliment. As I talked, Mrs. Ramirez's jaw clenched. Miss Porter scribbled notes on a pad she'd pulled from her bag. Can we show them this? I asked, pointing to my journal. When they come, the people from the hotline. Yes, she said. In fact, I want you to keep writing. What you felt. What you ate. When you tried to call them. Everything you remember. So they can't twist it later, I murmured. So they can't say I'm exaggerating. Exactly, she replied. You're allowed to protect yourself with the truth. The phrase made my chest tighten. Protect myself with the truth. That sounded a lot like revenge. And I realized I didn't hate that. Later, when the caseworker arrived, She introduced herself as Miss Chen and asked to look around the house. I watched her eyes linger on the nearly empty fridge, the trash can with only a few wrappers, the unused debit card on the counter. She didn't have to say anything. Her expression said it all. "How long have your parents been gone?" she asked gently. 8 days, I answered. "They planned 5 weeks. And who checks on you?" "No one. Until today." "Do they call?" "Not since the airport," I said. She sent a selfie from Santiago with a heart emoji. "That was it, Miss." Chen nodded slowly, then turned to Miss Porter and Mrs. Ramirez. "Thank you for contacting us," she said as they talked. I slipped away for a second and set up my phone on the counter. Opening the camera app again, I recorded a quiet clip of the empty fridge, the lonely table, the caseworker's bag resting on the chair. "This is what our house looked like when they finally noticed I was alone," I said into the camera. "This is what my mother will walk into when she comes back." When I was done, I tucked my phone into my pocket. The recording safely saved. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was documenting. Ms. Chen came back to me. "For now, you won't be alone again," she said. "We're arranging for you to stay with Mrs. Ramirez while we speak to your parents and figure out the next steps." I glanced at my neighbor. She smiled softly and squeezed my shoulder. "Is that okay with you, Maya?" Miss Chen asked. I thought about my empty house, the long, quiet nights, the way my mother's last message had been about empanadas instead of me. Then I thought about something else. What it would do to my parents when they came home and found not just a lonely kid, but an official report waiting for them. "Yes," I said. "I want to stay somewhere I'm not invisible." That night, as I packed a small bag of clothes in my journal, I looked around my room one more time. The posters on my wall, the stuffed animal on my bed, the window that faced the street. "This was the place you left," I whispered under my breath, imagining my mother hearing it later. "But it's not the place you'll find when you come back. If you were me, would you choose to forgive and forget? Or would you let every empty shelf and unanswered call become proof that could change everything?" Moving next door should have felt like nothing, just a few steps across a patch of grass, but carrying my small bag and my journal into Mrs. Ramirez's house felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. I wasn't just a kid in the middle anymore. I was the kid someone had chosen to protect. Her house smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. The table was set with placemats, and her fridge was full of actual food, not just leftovers clinging to the corners of shelves. My stomach growled before I could stop it. "We'll fix that first," she said, pretending not to notice my embarrassment. "Come on, let's cook together." We walked back to my kitchen with reusable bags. This time, she didn't just grab food at random. She let me choose pasta, sauce, vegetables, bread, fruit, things that would last, things that made the kitchen look like someone actually lived there. "Keep the receipts," Miss Porter said quietly as we unloaded the bags. "They show what wasn't here before today." So we put the receipts in my journal, behind the pages where I'd written about my hunger. Layer by layer. As we cooked, the sound of boiling water and sizzling garlic wrapped around me like something I'd missed without knowing it. "Have you ever made spaghetti from scratch like this?" Mrs. Ramirez asked. "Not really," I admitted. "My mom mostly microwaves stuff or we order takeout." "Then today you learn," she said with a smile. "You learn how to feed yourself properly. Nobody can take that away from you." I stirred the sauce, watching the red swirl around the pan. It felt symbolic somehow, like all the anger and hurt inside me was finally going somewhere, turning into something I could use. While we waited for the pasta, Miss Chen came back with more questions. She asked for my mother's messages, the time of her flight, the last time she called. I showed her the one selfie, the Eiffel Tower in the background, and the caption, "Finally free for a month." "Free from what?" Miss Chen asked. I stared at the screen. "From me, I guess." She wrote something down. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. "Do you want to say anything directly to your parents?" she asked. "We sometimes include statements from kids in our reports." For a second, my throat closed up. Then I felt my journal pressing against my arm where I held it, and my answer came out clear. "Yes," I said. I want them to know exactly what this felt like. We sat at the table, and I wrote while the spaghetti cooked. You said I was mature enough to be alone. But being mature doesn't mean I don't need food. It doesn't mean I don't get scared. You told everyone how hard you work, but you didn't notice when your own kid was counting crumbs. By the time you read this, other adults will have already seen what you did. They'll have seen the empty fridge, the dead card, the journal where I had to record my own neglect. If there are consequences, they're not because I betrayed you. They're because you left me. When I finished, I slid the paper toward Miss Chen. Can you make sure they see this? I can, she said, and I will. Later that evening, I sat at Mrs. Ramirez's table, twirling spaghetti around my fork. The first bite almost made me cry. It was warm and real and tasted like something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. This is what normal is supposed to feel like, I thought, not sitting alone on the floor eating dry crackers out of a box. Ms. Porter stayed for dinner, and we talked about school, books, even silly things like the worst cafeteria lunches we'd ever had, for an hour. I almost forgot that my life was technically falling apart in the house next door, but when the plates were cleared and the grown-ups started talking quietly in the living room, I heard pieces of their conversation. Words like temporary placement, investigation, and possible removal of custody. I didn't fully understand every legal term, but I understood the feeling underneath them. My parents had treated my absence like a vacation from responsibility. Now there was a real chance they could lose the right to call themselves my guardians at all. Back in the guest room where I would sleep, I set my phone up one more time and hit record. Day 8. But it's different now, I said softly into the camera. I'm not in my house. I'm somewhere safe. People know. They saw the truth. I looked straight at my own reflection. If you're my mom watching this, I want you to remember something, I continued. You always said actions have consequences, that if I messed up, I'd have to face them. This time it's your turn. This isn't just my story. It's your choice written in real time. I stopped the recording and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My heart wasn't light. It hurt. I still miss the idea of parents who would have stayed, but I also knew something else now. I wasn't powerless. Maybe one act of kindness really could change everything, but would it be enough to fix a lifetime of being second place to work and vacations? Or would it simply give me the strength to walk away from them for good when the time came? The days at Mrs. Ramirez's house felt unreal at first, like I'd stepped into someone else's family by accident. I woke up to the smell of breakfast instead of the sound of my own stomach growling. There was always someone asking how I slept, not just assuming I was fine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to prove I was independent every second just to be tolerated. But even with the warmth, there was a countdown ticking in the background. Every adult around me knew it. I knew it. At some point, my parents would have to come back. At some point, they would have to walk into everything they left behind. On the second night, my phone buzzed while I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. A number I recognized flashed on the screen. My mother's international number. I stared at it until the screen started to dim. Aren't you going to answer? Mrs. Ramirez asked gently. My fingers trembled. What if she's just calling to yell at me for ruining her trip? Then you'll know exactly where you stand, she said calmly. But you don't have to talk to her alone. I hit accept and put the phone on speaker. Maya? Her voice snapped through the line sharp, not worried. What is going on? Why is there some woman from Child Services emailing me about an investigation? Why is your school involved? Do you have any idea what this looks like for me? There it was. No, are you okay? No, are you safe? Just what this looks like for me. I swallowed. They're involved because you left me, I said. My voice shook, but I got the words out. You went to South America for 5 weeks. You left me alone with $50 and a debit card that didn't work. They saw the house. They saw the fridge. They saw everything. You're exaggerating. She shot back instantly. There was plenty of food. You know how dramatic you can be. And you're 12, not a toddler. I can't believe you would turn people against us like this. Do you understand what you're doing to our reputation? Across the table, I saw Mrs. Ramirez's jaw tighten. She leaned closer so her voice would carry. This is Mrs. Ramirez. I'm the neighbor. I'm also the one who bought your daughter groceries because there was almost nothing left. This isn't about reputation. It's about safety. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Why are you interfering? This is a family matter. Maya is fine. I glanced at the journal next to me, open to a page where I'd written, "No call for 8 days. No," I said quietly, cutting in before anyone else could. I wasn't fine. I'm not fine with what you did. There was a pause, and for a split second I thought maybe she'd finally hear me. Then she spoke again, each word shoved through clenched teeth. "We'll talk about this when we get back. And we're going to have a serious conversation about consequences. Young lady." The line went dead. Mrs. Ramirez reached over and silenced the phone before it could buzz again. "She's right about one thing," she said softly. "There will be consequences. But not just for you." The next day, Miss Chen came to the school and pulled me out of class. We sat in a small office that smelled like dry erase markers and old coffee while she scrolled through something on her tablet. "Your parents have moved their flight up," she told me. "They'll be home in 4 days instead of 4 weeks. My heart flipped. Part of me was relieved they weren't staying gone for the full 5 weeks. Another part of me recognized the reason. They weren't coming back for me. They were coming back to protect themselves. "What happens when they get here?" I asked. "We'll meet them at the house," she said. "I'll be there along with a supervisor from the department. Miss Porter has agreed to attend as a school representative. We want you to be part of the conversation if you feel safe." I thought about hiding at Mrs. Ramirez's house and letting the adults handle it. I thought about slipping into my room and pretending I was asleep when they walked in. Both options felt like going back to being invisible. "No," I said slowly. "I want to be there. I want them to see me. I want them to see what they came home to." Miss Chen nodded. "Then we'll make sure you have a voice in that room for the next 3 days." We prepared without calling it preparation. We didn't rehearse lines like in a school play, but we organized facts. Ms. Chen printed copies of my statement, the notes from my journal she had permission to use, the receipts from the groceries, screenshots of my mother's posts from South America, the call logs that showed how many times she hadn't checked in. "This isn't about punishing them for the sake of it," she reminded me. "This is about making sure you're safe. Whatever happens comes from their choices, not your existence." I understood what she meant. But another part of me, the part that remembered eating dry crackers in the dark, couldn't pretend this didn't feel like something else. It felt like just as it felt like holding up a mirror on the morning of their return. We went back into my house for the first time in days. It still smelled faintly like stale air and dust. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to walk through each room. This was my scene. I couldn't look away. Ms. Chen placed a thick folder on the kitchen table. Beside it, we put my journal open to the first page that said evidence. My phone sat next to it, turned on and ready. The first video I'd recorded, the one where I said, "Day 4, I'm still alone," was paused on the screen. The image of my own tired face stared back at me. "Are you sure you want this playing when they arrive?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "She always tells me stories don't matter unless there's proof. This is my proof." Mrs. Ramirez stood by the doorway, arms crossed but eyes kind. Miss Porter leaned against the counter, her school badge clipped neatly to her shirt, watching everything with quiet focus. The supervisor from the department sat at the table, flipping through the file one more time. We heard the car before we saw it. Tires on the driveway, doors slamming, muffled laughter. For a moment, my legs felt like rubber. Miss Chen stepped closer to me. "Remember, you don't have to protect them from the truth anymore," she said. "If they try to make you feel guilty, you can look at me, or at Mrs. Ramirez, or at Miss Porter. You're not alone in this room." I nodded, taking a steadying breath. The front door handle turned. The lock clicked. This was it. The moment everything split into before and after. If you were standing where I was, would you run to hug them and pretend nothing happened, or would you hold your ground and let them finally face what they'd done? The door swung open, and my mother walked in first, dragging her suitcase behind her like she had when she left. She was still wearing a stylish trench coat and sunglasses pushed up on her head like the airport was just another runway. My father followed, juggling bags and talking about something on his phone, his voice light like the world owed him an easy landing. They both stopped when they saw us. The laughter died on my father's lips. My mother's smile froze halfway. Her eyes jumped from the stranger at the table to Miss Porter by the counter to Mrs. Ramirez near the door and finally to me, standing next to the open journal and glowing phone. "What is this?" she demanded, dropping her suitcase handle. "What are all of you doing in my kitchen?" The supervisor rose calmly. "Mrs. Torres, Mr. Torres, my name is Miss Patel from Child Protective Services. Please have a seat. We need to discuss the situation regarding your daughter, Maya." My mother didn't sit. She stared at me instead, her eyes hard. "Maya, what did you tell them?" For a second, the old instinct kicked in, the one that made me want to shrink, apologize, twist the story to make her less angry. But the video on the phone caught my eye, that smaller, tired version of me on day 4. I lifted my chin. "I told them what happened," I said. "I told them the truth." My father tried to smooth things over. He set his bags down and forced a laugh. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. We left her with food, with money, with a debit card. She's a very mature 12-year-old. She knows how to take care of herself. Kids these days are more capable than people think." Miss Patel placed a printed sheet on the table and turned it toward them. "This is the activation record for your card," she said. "It was never set up with a PIN. It was declined multiple times when Maya tried to use it." She tapped another page. "These are photos taken of your refrigerator and pantry 9 days into your trip. The amount of food was not sufficient for an unsupervised minor and several items had already expired." My mother finally sat, more from shock than cooperation. "Yesterday. If you're seeing this, it means someone finally asked what happened to me." The camera panned across our kitchen, catching the nearly empty shelves, the lonely box of crackers, the silent room. My mother slapped a hand over her mouth. My father stared, his shoulders sinking. "No," my mother whispered, stepping back like the images were physically pushing her. "No, this can't be happening." But it was. And this time, she couldn't scroll past it or laugh it off. Ms. Patel folded her hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Torres. Based on our investigation, school reports, neighbor testimony, and Maya's own documentation, we have determined that leaving her unsupervised under these conditions qualifies as neglect under state law, effective immediately. There will be an emergency order in place. Maya will not be returning to unsupervised care with either of you until a full hearing is conducted." My mother shook her head violently. "You can't take my child from me over a misunderstanding. We just needed a break. Do you know how hard we work? Do you know what kind of stress we're under?" I took a breath and stepped forward. "I know," I said. "You tell everyone how hard you work. You tell your friends, your co-workers, your social media. But when I was alone, hungry, and scared, you didn't tell anyone about that. You didn't tell anyone where I was." Her eyes filled with tears. "Maya, you don't understand. Adults need time away too. We thought you'd be fine. We didn't mean to hurt you." The words I'd heard my whole life echoed in my head. Every time I forgot a chore, every time I slipped up, she'd say them with a cold finality. "Actions have consequences, Maya." So I said them back. "You always told me that actions have consequences," I said, my voice steady. "You taught me that if I made a choice, I had to live with what came next. This is what you taught me. This is what your choice looks like." The room went quiet. My mother looked like the ground had vanished beneath her. My father gripped the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Ms. Patel spoke again. "You'll have the opportunity to participate in parenting classes, psychological evaluations, and supervised visits if the court approves," she said. "This isn't about punishing you forever. It's about ensuring that Maya is safe and that this never happens again." My mother turned back to me, tears spilling now. "Maya, please," she begged. "Tell them you want to come home. Tell them we can fix this. We can start over. We can be better." I wanted to. A part of me, the part that still remembered bedtime stories and holiday decorations, wanted to rewind everything. But another part of me, The part that had spent nights recording videos in the dark knew that going back without change would mean saying none of it mattered. I want to be safe, I said. I want to be somewhere I'm seen before I disappear. Right now. That's not with you. Her face crumpled like paper. My father looked away, blinking rapidly. Ms. Patel placed a form on the table. For the duration of the investigation, Maya will remain in temporary placement with Mrs. Ramirez, she said. You'll be notified of the court date. Until then, you're not to contact her directly without going through our office. You're taking her side over her own parents, my mother whispered. No, I said softly. They're finally taking my side. For once, we left the house before they did. As I stepped out onto the porch, I heard my mother sobbing inside. My father trying to soothe her with words that sounded weak even from a distance, walking back across the grass to Mrs. Ramirez's house. I felt both heavy and strangely light. I hadn't ruined my family. They had done that themselves when they chose 5 weeks of freedom over a kid who still counted on them to come home every night. All I had done was refuse to hide it. Weeks later, at the hearing, I sat in a room that smelled like paper and old carpet while lawyers talked about risk factors and protective environments. My parents looked smaller than I remembered, sitting at their table, listening as people described their choices like evidence in a case. My videos were entered into the record. My journal pages were scanned. My own voice on the stand didn't shake as much as I thought it would. In the end, the judge ordered supervised visits and mandatory counseling for them. Full custody stayed out of their reach for now. They didn't go to jail. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment, but something more real and in a way sharper happened. They lost the automatic right to be in my life without someone watching. They lost the assumption that they were the good guys. That autumn, I learned how to cook more than spaghetti. I learned that help wasn't weakness and that telling the truth could be the strongest kind of revenge. There is not yelling, not breaking things, but simply refusing to let what happened stay invisible. My mother still sends messages, sometimes long paragraphs about how much she's changed, how sorry she is, how much she wants things to go back to normal. Maybe someday we'll find a version of normal that doesn't erase what happened. Maybe we won't. But I know this. The day she came home from South America expecting 5 weeks of stories and souvenirs, she walked into something she never saw coming, a daughter who had turned every empty shelf, every unanswered call, every hungry night into proof, a room full of adults who finally listened, a truth she could now talk. And when she whispered, "No, this can't be happening," I realized something important. It had been happening from the moment she chose a plane ticket over me. So tell me, if you were 12 and left alone with $50 while your parents chased their freedom, would you bury the story to keep their image clean? Or would you do what I did and let the truth be the revenge they never expected? Because here's what I learned that year, sitting in a borrowed room with a borrowed family, writing in a journal that became the most powerful thing I'd ever owned. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight back loudly. It's to hold up a mirror and let them see, for the first time, exactly who they've become.